Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Pixel, and today on the Sapphire Tech YouTube channel I want to take a look at Control running at a 4K resolution with and without ray tracing on our brand new SAPPHIRE NITRO RX 7900 XTX graphics card. Now as always, all the gameplay was recorded using AMD Relive, and the performance overlay was provided by Rivertune Statistics server with a custom skin. Now since Control released back in 2019, before AMD was really doing the ray tracing thing or had FSR, unfortunately Control doesn't have native support for FSR 2.1 or 2.2, but we are going to enable FSR 2.1 via a mod which basically looks to replace the game's native DLSS implementation with FSR 2.1. Now since this is a mod slash hack, there is most likely going to be some image related flaws and most likely some implementation issues, and I can tell you right now off the bat, I did come across quite a few implementation issues that a lot of people seem to be complaining about on forums and stuff, but I do think that I've got to the bottom of what causes them and how you can have a full playthrough with zero issues whilst using FSR 2.1, which I will go into later on in this video. First of all though, I want to take a look at Control running at a native 4K without ray tracing, because I still think, despite its age, and it's only a few years old, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's ancient, but despite its age, it's still one of the very best looking games on the market without a doubt. And it's not just because of its graphical fidelity, though that is amazingly high. You see, Remedy, the guys that made Max Payne, Alan Wake, Quantum Break and this, they have to be, I have to say it, they make the slickest looking games on the market without a doubt. They might not have the very best graphical fidelity, they might not have the most crazy stylings, but when it comes down to making slick looking games, like, I don't think anybody else does it better, and Control is like the personification of all their years of work. It's truly a masterpiece when it comes to slick artistic design. This can be best seen during pretty much any combat sequence, because the game makes use of this really thick kind of fog distortion with RGB color splitting effect. It basically makes fighting incredibly difficult because you can't actually see your enemies through it, but the way that it moves through the environment and the way that it looks, it's just beautiful. And on top of that, you've got one of the best destruction systems that I have ever seen in a video game. It's right up there with like Rainbow Six and maybe The Division, except because of the kind of abilities that you get in Control, the amount of debris and destruction that you're unleashing at any given moment is to the extreme. It's literal eye candy. I don't know how else to describe it. And that's just the in-combat stuff. Outside of combat, the game also has its own unique style. It constantly mixes in like real-world video footage with the in-game stuff, like putting it on TV screens in the game. And also it'll project it on like a wall or on some smoke. It just, I don't know what it is. This game just does something, and I love it. I love the visuals in Control.
You stopped it. Oh, thank you. That was horror.
Also, shout out to the performance capture. It might not be the very best nowadays. I mean, Death Stranding did it better and there's a couple of others, but generally speaking, I think the performance capture in Control is right up there. The cutscenes are really well done. I know I'm gushing lyrical right now, but I honestly believe that Control might be one of the most overlooked best graphic games of all time. Like, maybe one of the most overlooked games of all time. I know we got a lot of coverage early on because of its ray tracing implementations and because it was one of the first games with DLSS, but the game itself, like, if you haven't played it already and you haven't got it already, this is a game that I would recommend to anybody. It's got one of the best ray tracing implementations of all time. It's got great gameplay, and it's one of the most stylized games of all time. It's a masterpiece. I've never given the game this much praise. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there, and some of you have probably already played the game and just really don't like it, which is fine, but I am going to quickly list off some of the most common reasons why people don't like the game. Some people complain that they get lost too easily, they say that the combat is a bit repetitive, and they can't follow the story. If them three things don't bother you while you're playing the first couple of hours, there's a good chance you're going to enjoy the game right up until the end, and I know I did. But anyway, looking at performance, we're looking at around an average of 90 FPS, and this is with everything maxed out barring ray tracing, so that's including 4x MSAA at a 4K resolution, but I honestly do believe that this game needs it. Another thing that I want to point out is that I did notice that Radeon anti-lag did cause some frame time instability, so I do recommend turning that off. Also, the game doesn't do great with variable frame rates, so personally I would probably cap the frame rate to around 90 using an external frame rate limiter such as riveting a statistic server, just to make sure that I get the nicest feeling movement at all times. Ultimately though, at 4K we have absolutely zero issues running Control, but what happens if we enable ray tracing? Well, on average, I'd say that we lose around 50% of our performance by simply enabling ray tracing. In some sequences this can be a little bit higher, such as the Digital Foundry Corridor of Death, where we're more up towards 60 or 70% performance loss. Now, as is the case with most ray tracing titles, I have to be completely honest and tell you that in a lot of scenes you're most likely not going to notice that much visual difference. However, when them visual differences hit, they hit hard and they can make a substantial difference to the overall image. This is most obvious when looking at shiny reflective surfaces, and every now and again you will notice some extra bounce lighting and that'll look spectacular too, but with the bounce lighting and the shadows, you need to remember, unless you're looking at them side by side, it's really hard to tell the difference between what is ray traced and what is not. I'm going to stick to my guns and say that Control has got one of the best ray tracing implementations, but what happens if we just turn off the debris, the shadows and the global illumination? Well, we get left with ray trace reflections, which are the most obvious ray tracing feature, which you're going to see most of the time whilst playing because there's so many shiny surfaces. When just playing with ray trace reflections, we see that our average frame rate is actually above 60 and it manages to stay in the high 50s during most combat encounters, only every now and again dropping down into the mid 40s. On a decent FreeSync compatible monitor, this is very playable, and I don't think that most people are going to miss these shadows, debris and global illumination, to be honest. With that said though, this video is going to be looking at FSR 2.1, so can we actually play the game completely maxed out with all ray tracing and just using FSR quality mode? Well, let's find out. Again, like mentioned earlier in this video, we are enabling FSR 2.1 via a mod, so this is by no means a native implementation. I'll go into details on how to download the mod, how to install it, and how to get it to work optimally later on in this video, and I'm leaving it to later on because I'm not convinced that so many people are going to want to use it, because the actual native TAA does a decent job of upscaling from 1440p itself, and I'll put some comparisons again later in the video. Performance wise, with the game completely maxed out and FSR 2.1 set to quality mode, we're pretty much looking at doubling our frame rate at all times. Obviously, this makes combat feel so much nicer, and visually I don't think we're taking a massive hit, but there are most certainly a few little issues that we should look at. The most obvious visual difference is that the edges of objects, or basically any edge at all, seems to have this kind of blocky appearance. It's not massively noticeable at all during combat, but when you're sat around and you're looking for these nice comparison shots, it stands out quite a lot. Now, I did look into the DLSS implementation, and that seems to suffer from a similar kind of effect. I don't know what it is, but it just looks a little bit odd. The second visual anomaly that I saw was that if you stand still around volumetrics, you might start to notice some vertical lines going all the way through them. This only happens with stationary cameras and doesn't really affect the game whilst you're moving around, which, let's be honest, is the vast majority of the time, barring cutscenes where sometimes it can be quite obvious. All in all, I don't think that the FSR 2.1 implementation is by any means bad, but it's certainly different from just upscaling from 1440p using TAA, which, whilst looking quite soft, does seem to have less issues overall. Honestly, I really think this is going to come down to personal preference, because FSR 2.1 does look a lot sharper than TAA 1440p upscaled, but it does have a couple of issues. Some people would really prefer the sharpness over the softness, and it really depends in which camp you're in. Personally, I think that I would stick with the FSR 2.1 mod over the native 1440p upscaled, but I can definitely see why some people would choose differently. As a side note, I should probably point out that with FSR 2.1 quality mode, we're basically rendering at 1440p, which basically demonstrates that the 7900 XTX is more than capable of running Control at a native 1440p with all the ray tracing turned on. I just thought you might find that interesting. But anyway, let's finally take a look at how we install FSR 2.1 into Control, and most importantly how to make sure it keeps working, because like I mentioned earlier, there are a few issues. So first of all, you're going to want to download the mod. There is a link in the description, so once you've grabbed the mod, you're going to want to unpack it using either 7-zip or WinRAR, and then copy over the 2 DLL files into the game's main directory. Once you've done that, you're going to want to double click on the EnableSignatureOverride.reg edit. This basically tricks the game into thinking that you can run DLSS. Once you've done that, you're going to want to jump into the game, and this bit is very important. You need to do it in this order. You need to load a game or start a new game, go into the game, then go into the settings menu, then switch on DLSS, and then play the game. If you don't do it in this order, there is a good chance that you're going to be greeted by a black screen with just the UI elements moving around. Basically, once you've enabled FSR 2.1, you cannot press escape or go back to the main menu without breaking it completely. Once you've broken it, the only way to get it working again is to go back into the options menu, disable DLSS, and then quit the game, restart the game, and then follow the steps that I mentioned earlier. So load the game first, then enable your graphical settings with DLSS, and then don't press escape or go back to the menu again. Obviously, this is far from ideal, but I suppose that's the price you pay when you're dealing with mods and not a native implementation. I really do think that Remedy should go back into Control and add native support for FSR because, like I mentioned earlier, this game is a ray tracing masterpiece and performance can be really good, so it would be nice to have native support in the near future. With all that said though, that is once again going to be me done for today, so from myself and everybody here at the Sapphire Tech YouTube channel, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. If you've got any questions, suggestions or feedback, you can leave them down in the comment section below. And if you haven't done already, then please do remember to slap that subscribe button and ring that bell so you'll be notified of our future uploads. For now though, once again, thanks for watching, we'll catch you later, bye bye.